Welcome to another open source episode for the beginning of 2021. Actually, this is take two because, we do things on the spur of the moment. And the first episode we recorded last week didn't quite work out in terms we had some technical difficulties. So welcome back, dear audience. It's great to have you with us again with this episode. Now, because this is a new year and because, we like to experiment, the three of us, we thought we'd try something new. And what we three of us share is we've both been, in the corporate world and also have created our own startups. So we thought it could be perhaps an interesting episode to try and spice things up from the traditional talking about what's in the news, what made us wonder and what we thought was interesting, by talking about some of the differences between the two, and also talk a little bit about the differences, starting a startup for a certain product, or maybe just to get wealthy, or maybe for a certain cause. So we'll kind of leave it open to that and see where the conversation takes us. So I'm going to open it up with Mark. So no pressure, Mark. If you've been in the corporate world, you're obviously running, your own startup at the moment, and you are talking, to a number of other entrepreneurs around the world at the moment. What is your sense, in terms of the different kinds of people who perhaps go in the entrepreneurial world, who go into the startup world, how fulfilled perhaps they feel, how much in line it is with what they think they are, who they are, maybe?
Well, and I've done a bit of research on this, not least because one of the startups I kind of co-founded with three other partners is around studying entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs' behavior. So there are different types of entrepreneur and things that spur people. So some are necessity entrepreneurs. So what we call that they lost their job, other stuff happened. There wasn't an alternate. So they thought, right, in that case, if it's not there, I'll build it. So they'll do that. There are also sometimes what we call one-time entrepreneurs. They just spot an opportunity. The finger spinner is a great example of that. It was there, it went crazy for 6 months, and then it kind of evaporated. There are people that have characteristics of what we call every time entrepreneurs, but we'll save that for another time. But the ones that really drive forward, and it's where we look at a source of energy, so real intrinsic energy, often comes from an alignment, a real strong felt purpose, and that's what spurs them on. And it might be that they're a match or a mismatcher, so they find things out there that they believe are missing or can be improved or do other things. But primarily, their drive is around something that they care passionately about. And generally, the really, really successful ones, back to your previous point, are not motivated by an outcome that is wealth and money. Those people tend to not do particularly well because they end up focusing on the outcome rather than what gets there. So if they do the right things and the right things right, that will just come as a product. So yeah, it's definitely around the passion, the heartfelt stuff. Again, we go back to that kind of piece. Yeah, that would be my starter for 10.
That's brilliant. It's a great starting point, Mark. Thank you very much for that. Rory, you are on your beginning of your journey of your startup. Do you want to perhaps tell us or perhaps react to Mark's points?
Well, first of all, to say that one of Mark's startups is something that my startup, we had our team evaluated by Mark's pioneering methodology, and he hasn't allowed me to talk about this, but I don't care. We're live. I'm going to talk about it anyway. And it was really cool because it really assessed our team in a way that was quite authentic and pointed out strengths and weaknesses and allowed us, we're in future going to append that to any kind of funding request that we make, saying, we're a relatively strong team. We've been assessed by using this very pioneering method. And so anyway, that's something to watch out for. Entrepleo, I hope it's out soon, Mark, on the general market, but I've already made the most of it. So, but regarding this point about heart, I think it's all about that. And I'd like to flip it a bit and say, it's so much about that it's been clear to me from my corporate career that it only ever works, like a change or an initiative or whatever it is that you're trying to do beyond daily business in a corporate, only ever works and drives passion and makes people work for it, really, if there is that alignment to the fundamental value of the company. So even if you're not working in a startup, right, you're working in a corporate, but you are trying to sort of push a project. We've all been in these meetings where someone sets an operational target and everyone's eyes just glaze over and sort of everyone's falling asleep and not wanting to hear any more about it, but just trying to be polite. But, you know, often these things do have a higher purpose. So if the company has some kind of a higher purpose, then presumably, you know, what it's trying to do strategically does too. And so, you know, I don't understand these leaders who don't ally the change or the operational target or the strategic target that's trying to be obtained to the higher purpose of the company or the organization that they're working for. It's instinctive, isn't it? If you will work harder for it, and you will be more honest in your approach to it if you're not doing a box ticking, and if you're doing something where there's value beyond just loss ratio saving or whatever it is.
Well, I think some of that goes back to some of our motivational drivers, and it's not to trivialize it. In fact, it's hugely important. Is we want to feel that what we do has purpose and meaning, and there's something attributed to that. Yeah, that is critical. And yeah, I'm always fascinated why leaders don't tie it back into the organizational cause and context to give people a bit of a roadmap and an explanation. And I keep coming back to, I think it's a lack of empathy again, a lack of empathy with the members of the team, and a lack of empathy with what the organization's trying to do for, you know, one of those most important stakeholder groups, you know, customers, the beneficiaries of it, and then that other most important group, the people that help get to that and deliver that.
Or it could just be that, you know, it's people say it's better to travel than to arrive, right? And so there is a certain pleasure in the journey, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe people sometimes forget, you know, where they're trying to get to, and faced with decisions, they suddenly become in their heads, you know, they take different readings of the landscape, and they suddenly start saying, okay, so, you know, I can't see the wood from the trees here, so I'm just going to try and head out of this bush and take whatever operational target I'm given, and stop looking up and seeing, you know, where am I supposed to get to, and what's the overall thing. So maybe a lack of empathy, maybe also just this thing that in any journey you are faced with, you know, multiple small decisions, and it's sometimes hard to relate back to why did I come on this holiday or this trip, you know?
Indeed. There is I think another point, you know, that for me comes down to authenticity. So often, you know, you hear, and I know I've done it in my first job out of uni at Barclays, is you are who you are, and then when you cross that barrier and you enter the building, it's like if, you know, you put on a whole new character, because that's what you think is expected out of you. And how can you be authentically aligned to the values of the company if you're not being authentically yourself when you're in the company itself? So I think that applies whether you're a graduate, you know, entering, you know, a corporate for the first time, or potentially the CEO, because we all feel that we have to impersonate, you know, that role. So I think there's this element of authenticity, which makes it difficult at all levels for a company to be able to strive with real value.
Well, I think that's a brilliant point, and authenticity is really important. But the interesting thing is, we don't arrive with a label or a book that defines to us what being our authentic self is. And in fact, you know, as we're becomings, we're changing. That changes over time. It doesn't mean that we become a completely different person, but there's a lot of underlying, you know, values and beliefs around that. But often people are figuring out who they are, and they go through experiences, and sometimes it's actually the mismatching that helps. Oh, that's not me. I suddenly don't feel comfortable with this. You know, how many people really think about who they are and who they want to be? Because when you start to think about who you are and who you want to be, then sometimes there's a gap, and bridging that gap can be uncomfortable. And then it takes courage sometimes. And you know, few people are fearless in this. So how can they be confident to express themselves within the environment they're in, you know, in the work environment, particularly when it's not aligned, when there may be certain hygiene factors that say, well, I need to provide for myself, for others, and do that. And then people start to make these trade-offs, and then they will start to create a narrative around it to justify it to themselves. Well, I'll just do this for another X years until I get promoted and I don't need to behave that way, or until I put my kids through school, or until I get this, and they're putting it off and putting it off. And then unfortunately what happens when they're not being authentic is it starts to decay inside, and then you can see it in the cynicism in people, and they can ultimately become toxic, not just to themselves but to others. But it doesn't mean that it's easy, and it's not judging. I know I'm a completely different person now than I was 2 years ago, than I was even 6 months, not completely different 6 months, but 5 years ago, or when I started my career, the things that were important to me, the things I understood about myself, and I'm still figuring myself out. I'm definitely more comfortable in who and what I'm becoming, but it's not clear cut, is it?
No, and that's, I think referring back to your point, Rory, discovering who you are is a constant journey. I think it'll be a journey to your deathbed, potentially. But what I found interesting, so I've had 3 kind of experiences. I've had the corporate world, and the only times I was, close to being authentic or being genuine is when I had a great boss, who managed to let me flourish in a certain way, or when there was a project that I really believed in. And that was sometimes being an intrapreneur within the company, and that I enjoyed. That was quite similar to some of the other startups I've built. I mean, including InsureBlocks, my present startup. I absolutely love it because, it's about discovering new technologies, about changing, the status quo. And these are a lot of my drivers personally. But is it something that's completely aligned to what I do? Not quite. And that's when, things changed when I decided, to co-found Rebalance Earth, because I'm just 100% authentic. It's literally being able to walk in front of an audience of thousands completely naked and say, this is who I am, and that's okay. And to come to kind of the realization that whatever we are facing or the way societies has been established, well, that's all been set up by humans, like myself, like yourself. Some of them were smarter than me, probably a lot more, but I'm happy to challenge that. If I don't believe the state that in which our planet is right now is sustainable, and I'm not going to wait for somebody to change it. Is it going to be the government's going to change it? Well, no. I mean, we've seen the crap that can come out when we had Trump, and hopefully with Biden, that's going to change a lot. So not quite the trust. Is it going to be the Jeff Bezos or the Elon Musk who are going to do it? Yeah, but that's, again, you're depending upon somebody else. So it's like, okay, can I just get on with it? I'm just a little person. Suddenly I got 60 individuals, who are part of this. And I love it because, well, you guys don't know, but when I was 6, I started writing an encyclopedia of the animals, and I was doing elephants, after the other. And then at 15, I created the first ecological society in Saudi Arabia, of all places, right? But the thing is that it's suddenly tied to all these things I've had since my childhood. And that has enabled, I've always had this vision, which I would love to grow up holding the 5-year-old version of me. Because the thing is, I don't know. I mean, you guys know, you've got kids, the kids, when they're a young age, they ask the best questions, and it's always, but why? And sometimes, we adults, we get frustrated with all, having to answer those questions. And we get frustrated not because they are asked that often, but because they're so, simple. We don't actually know how to answer it correctly because we complicate things.
Right. Well, also we get path dependency, right? So we have these building blocks in our lives that we put down, certain assumptions that become piled on top of each other, and we don't really want to go back and challenge them. One of my favorite professionals to work with is Stefania Passera, who redesigns people's contracts for them. And she continuously asks the very annoying question, why do you need that?
Yeah.
And the person is like, well, we've always had it. It means this. And she's like, okay, it means that, but why do you need it? And it's those types of people who ask the repetitive, childish questions who eventually make you realize that you're working off a bunch of assumptions that, you should allow yourself to challenge a bit more, maybe.
So we'll listen to her a bit more. There she is.
Well, and that's another great example. So, and Rory, thanks for your kind words about the entrepreneur startup. And the important thing, there's a group of us. So there's Mark and Wyatt, the other two co-founders, and now there's Reb as well. But Wyatt, Dr. Wyatt Woodsmall, has been studying human behavior for a long time, and one of his passions and soapboxes is around what he calls the diseducational system. So he says, at 4 years old, children are world class in terms of their ability to generate ideas. By the time they spent 10 years in the diseducational system, by the time they get to 10, they're just average. Right? Because it's about safety. And so, people conform, and Rory, you'll remember this when Walid first started talking about his latest venture, and you and I sat there or stood there and watched him. It's like this bottle of pop that he'd shaken up. He was fizzing, wasn't he? His hands and ideas were going off. And at this point, we were, wow, you really feel this, don't you? Yeah, I'm going to do this and bang, bang, bang. And you've seen him on the calls with the other people. And again, there was that moment from one of his podcasts that he will know what the podcast number was when he heard from Ralph Shami. He'd done some analysis of things. And it was almost like we were almost, at a point when a star's born. You see that first explosion, a huge amount of energy. And we were there maybe the day after and seeing that shock. And at that point you say, yeah, here's a calling. This is heartfelt.
It really, really is. And I mean, there are so many ways, you can live a happy life, right? And there's so many ways. And I think one, which is where you feel you're actually helping, I know this sounds big, but you're helping humanity move one step in the right direction, to protect our planet, to have a symbiotic relationship with nature, with a prosperous economy, with local communities, indigenous communities around the world, and have it in a way where one doesn't feel abused, where it's a win-win-win for everyone, and it can be. And you know what? And this organization can also make money, a lot of money, but it does it in a way which is authentic, which is based on values. It doesn't have a loser in any parts of this.
Mark, he's off again.
I gotta be careful.
And it's great, but hey, I'm going to let him carry on because he's using my favorite words. He's looking for the and in things as well. And I think that is critical. I mean, I think it's. I was reminded of Amanda Gorman's speech yesterday at Joe Biden's
inauguration.
And I'm just trying to pull the speech up, but there was some the hill we climb.
Yes.
If you haven't read it, I'd urge you to read it. There's so many great lines in it, but I've got to find one. I'll keep talking and I'll find it. It was incredible.
I mean, Rory, for example, so you were at Swiss Re for 20 odd years, right? If I remember correctly.
Well, not quite. Well, 15, whatever. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
A long time.
I was counting anymore.
Yeah, right.
And now, that you've made that jump, and let's get things straight. Startup world is extremely hard, right? As you know, but how do you feel, compared to that corporate experience? And it's not to say corporate life is bad, it's just different, right?
Yeah, no, it's different. It's the values piece we talked about. So I'm very aligned behind this rather sort of particular thing that I'm doing, very specialist, and I associate it with it 100% because I've been able to guide it all the way. Partly it's about shared decision making. So every time you've created something where you've had a hand in every decision, of course you feel empowered and motivated. And I think that's kind of one of that's one of the issues with corporate life, isn't it? It's sometimes hard to see through these different strands to the higher purpose, but I think asking Stefania's question of why, why are we doing this? How does it align? Can make you feel more comfortable. And I think corporates are great. They have a reach, they have an ability to deliver. There's lots of good things there, and I really don't mind being in teams where there are lots of leaders. but it's true that you get more kinship with the ethical side and with the purpose if you've done it yourself. This is clear.
Yeah, but I think the corporates, I'm not quite sure how yet, but I think they can achieve that objective. And it is when they start delivering the answers to those whys, and then that the answer is not, well, we've done it all, we've been doing this for decades, that's not an answer.
That's the Kodak answer.
That's an excuse. Yeah, it's a Kodak excuse, and so many others.
But I do think, there are a lot of great corporates with great cultures and great causes, and things have continued. So, these can be very old organizations, but, they continue to articulate their purpose and connect people to it, and they evolve and they do those things. And often the most adaptable ones have got a clear purpose, and then they don't get obsessed with a product or a service, because they're able to lift it back up to saying, well, this is why we're here. This is what's important to us. So
I think it was Unilever, isn't it? Unilever always hits highest every year in terms of ESGs and other forms of criteria.
They're tremendous. People like Dole Foods, they're another great example of doing that. And, what some of the early ESG work around is, a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of community, and seeing things as ands and not ors, and not as zero-sum games, and trying to put back. So I think that's that's important as well. I think it's so it's not as stark as corporates are bad, or
of course not
bad, and startups. There's some terrible cultures in startups as well.
Yeah, of course.
It's about people finding and connecting with what they feel is important to them at a point in life. It's about, one of my values is around conscious choice, and I think if people can make that, then they're incredibly empowered.
Yeah. Agreed. Did you find the?
I have found the line from this, and again, I'll post a link in here, because I think there's so many great things that we want. You look at this poem and you think, that's my favorite line. No, that's my favorite line. That's my favorite line. But there's a great line that says, we will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens.
Yeah, it's so true. And
that was the line.
Yeah, and yeah, especially, I think especially when you have children, that becomes even more relevant, which is, well, what have I done to make their world richer or more fulfilled? And I know before I couldn't answer it authentically.
Yeah.
Now
we like the next line then.
Okay.
And I'll just, if you indulge me, the last one. So it says, our blunders become their burdens, but one thing is certain: if we merged mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy, and change is our children's birthright.
Yeah, I love it.
So there we
love
go.
it. I don't know if you know it, Rory knows, we have 3 principles, within Rebalance Earth, which is be human, have love, and give hope. And that for me is the simplest things, we can give. But I'm conscious that we've been babbling a little bit, and we could talk for hours about this. And the audience, what is your experience? What is your reaction to what we've shared? Or more importantly, would you like to share your own story? Whether it's from the corporate world, whether it is from a startup world, whether it is from a not-for-profit, for a charity. All views are wonderful and unique and great in their own ways. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're going to be trying a lot of different formats this year in terms of the content and maybe even how we deliver it. So if you have suggestions on what you'd like for us to do, please put it down in the comments. Lovely catching up with all of you in the beginning of this new year, and looking forward to seeing you again all next week. Bye, everyone.
Take care now.